bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe, we live for you. Oh, we live for you.
We sing holy.
And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of every praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save.
You're worthy, Lord.
Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe, we live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around.
Sing holy one more time.
Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me.
God, you are the source of love and life, and we ask that you be with us this morning in this time of worship as we seek the love it takes to walk in the ways of your Son. Help us love our enemies and bless those who wrong us, for we cannot do so alone. Teach us the joy of treating others with all the same respect and goodness. with the hope that they will treat us, that we hope they will treat us with. May our every word and deed make known that we are your beloved children and vessels of your love. God, this morning we seek to know and to show your love because it has been shown to us. And you've proved it again this morning as you have come to meet with all of us who are not always the best people, not always perfect people, not always exact images of your love, and yet you are here in our midst today, and we give you thanks and praise for that. Amen.
Today we are at the end of the Art of Hearing series that we have been going through over the last several weeks. And we end with what I think is an appropriately named message, hard to hear. And our gospel passage this morning, as familiar as it is to many of us, is still just that. It is still a message that is hard to hear. The words of Jesus in this passage are hard for us to hear, or maybe more than that, they are hard for us to really listen to and to accept and to take seriously. It's hard to hear these challenging words from Jesus as anything more than sort of like wishful thinking, an unrealistic idea that isn't even worth trying to live into. But at the same time, there are few places in the Gospels where there is more clear, specific, and directed advice on how to live. And this is a perfect case of be careful what you ask for, right? I think sometimes we think, if somebody just told me exactly what I was supposed to do, then this would all be so much easier. But here we have some clear instructions, and, we might not find them so easy to follow. Because in this passage, Jesus is listing sort of the ways of faithful living, and the ways to act and lead a faithful, meaningful, and joy-filled life. And as we begin to look at this list and these words from Jesus, because it is both familiar and hard to hear, I want to invite you to hear these words again. This time we're going to hear them from the Message translation, which is familiar enough that you'll recognize it, but different enough that it might open your ears in a new way. To you who are ready for the truth, I say this: love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with the energies of prayer for that person. If someone slaps you in the face, stand there and take it. If someone grabs your shirt, gift wrap your best coat and make a present of it. If someone takes unfair advantage of you, use the occasion to practice the servant life. No more tit-for-tat stuff. Live generously. Here is a simple rule of thumb for behavior. Ask yourself what you want people to do for you, and then grab the initiative and do it for them. If you only love the lovable, do you expect a pat on the back? Run-of-the-mill sinners do that. If you only help those who help you, do you expect a medal? Garden variety sinners do that. If you only give for what you hope to get out of it, do you think that's charity? The stingiest of pawnbrokers does that. I tell you, love your enemies, help and give without expecting a return. You'll never, I promise, regret it. Live out this God-created identity the way our Father lives towards us, generously and graciously, even when we're at our worst. Our Father is kind. You be kind. Don't pick on people, jump on their failures, criticize their faults, unless, of course, you want the same treatment. Don't condemn those who are down. That hardness can boomerang. Be easy on people. You'll find life a lot easier. Give away your life. You'll find life given back. Not merely given back, but given back with bonus and blessing. Giving, not getting, is the way. Generosity begets generosity. So Jesus' words here seem to have one simple unifying theme, and that is a call to live with radical generosity in every area of our lives. Living and giving generously creates space for God to use the gift and the giver to exponentially multiply the power of what's been given. Generosity and abundant giving of our time and of our talents and of our money, it can be a catalyst for generosity in others, and it has the power to transform both the giver and those that receive. And as we hear Jesus call us to a life of radical love and generosity, I think it's important that we avoid the temptation to sort of boil these words down to some sort of formula. Because this isn't about forgiving so that we will be forgiven. It isn't about what we can get or earn or the way we get or earn it. It's more, these words from Jesus are really more about a story. More about the story of how forgiveness can inspire forgiveness, of how love can inspire and cultivate love, how mercy can bring forth mercy and grace from other places and seemingly from out of nowhere. 2 Sundays ago, on our way home from church, I got talked into going through the Biscuitville drive-through before we went home, and obviously I had to be talked into it because I was firmly against, that. And so, as we did on our way, we gathered orders for everybody. And with 6 of us, even a trip through a fast food drive-through can be a fairly large order and can get fairly expensive. But we go through the line and we place our order, and then we get up to the window. And the second we get up to the window, the person hands me all my food, which, triggers that isn't the way it normally happens, right? Something was a little off. And then I realized, oh yeah, they usually make me pay first. But I took the food and then I started reaching for my wallet. And as I was waiting for him to tell me our total, and then he says, oh no, the person in front of you paid for your order. Score, right? Nice, yeah. And at first I was a little confused, like really? And then I looked, I'm like, oh, I can still see the car, and didn't recognize the car, didn't recognize anybody in the car. And then my next thought when I figured out that I didn't think they knew me was like, do they have any idea how many people they were buying Biscuitville for? And it was like $40 worth of biscuits, right? And then I just basked in a moment in our good fortune, right? Like, that's $40 on biscuits I didn't have to spend. But as I sat there for a second, a little stunned about all that had happened, I looked at the 2 people that were working in the drive-through window, and something about the way they were looking at me and they had this sort of barely contained joy on their faces, which, if you're not familiar, is not normally how fast food workers look, right? And something about the way they were looking kicked something into gear in my mind, and I realized, oh, I should pay for the people behind me, right? And, what it looked like if the pastor didn't do that, right? And so as soon as I offered to do that, the face of the workers lit up even more. And the guy who handed me my food said, "This is so awesome." I was like, well, good. Yeah, I thought so too. And you could just tell that they were really getting a kick out of what was happening. And so, making conversations, waiting for him to, run my credit card. And I said, so does this sort of thing happen often? He's like, this is the first time anything like this has ever happened to us. And he said, but he said, you're the 9th person in a row that has done this. And we want to keep it going as long as we can. We want to see how many people we can get to do this. And so we went home with a great story. And then about 30 minutes later, one of Charlie's friends showed up carrying a bag from Biscuitville. And before we could say anything, he blurts out, somebody paid for my order. And it turns out that he was the 15th person in line that had been paid for. And he said, well, of course, I had to keep it going too. I went through the other day, that has stopped. You've got to pay for yourself now. So don't think you're getting free biscuits today. And it's a simple story. And free biscuits aren't likely to change the world. I don't want to eliminate that as a possibility, but they're not likely to change the world. But this silly story and these free biscuits, it was an illustration of the power of a simple act and the exponential power of living generously. This story is a small indication of what happens when we introduce grace and mercy and love into the world. And the way these positive things can be a catalyst for more positive things is what this message from Jesus is all about. And perhaps the most contagious part of this generous kind of living is that it is truly offered freely. It is offered without judgment and without any expectation of return. The first person who started that line didn't have anyone pay for them. They had already paid for their own. They were out of the drive-through line. They weren't getting anything back. And the people in front of us in the Biscuitville line, they didn't know who we were or what our financial situation was. Again, I'm convinced they didn't know there were so many of us. And the truth is, they might have needed a free meal much more than we did. We didn't ask ourselves how much the bill was for the car behind us or what kind of person was in that car or, tell me what kind of car that person is driving. We didn't ask any of those questions. And the call to a different kind of life in these words from Jesus is an invitation to all of us to be a part of something, to be a part of his mission to bring reconciliation and love into this broken world. And the implementation of God's love and grace, of God's mercy and forgiveness in the world is supposed to come through us. That is how God designed this to work, is that we are the instruments of his love and grace. We are the ones that are supposed to bring healing and wholeness to the world around us. In this passage, we are being told and we are being invited to love and to forgive and to show mercy everywhere we go. We are called to do that so that these things might multiply in our own lives, so that they might multiply in our communities and in our world. And so often when we think about generosity and giving, or when your pastor talks about generosity and giving, we think we're just talking about money. And that is a part of it. But the generous, meaningful life that Jesus is calling us to isn't really about opening our wallets or our pocketbooks. It is about a generous spirit and abundant giving and sharing in every area of our lives. And maybe the clearest place to see what Jesus really means is in the first and probably most famous command in this passage, and it's also probably the one that is the hardest: love your enemies. And that is an iconic phrase. Everyone knows that phrase. It's so familiar, though, I think we don't even really hear it. We miss that love your enemies is not some pie in the sky dream from a shiny, happy Jesus disconnected from reality, but it is instead a command for what it looks like to follow Jesus. We misunderstand, too, I think, what Jesus means because of the way we tend to use the word love. You've probably heard from one pastor or another in a Bible study or something that there are a whole bunch of different words in the New Testament, in Greek, that are all translated in our New Testament as the word love. And the word that is used here in this passage, it doesn't mean romantic love. It doesn't mean liking someone. It doesn't even mean friendship. Instead, what this word means is a wholehearted, unreserved, unconditional desire for the well-being of someone else. Nothing is held back. This kind of love implies that there isn't hesitation. There's no calculation of costs and benefits, no expectation of receiving anything in return. This is not the kind of love that gives and trades. There aren't payoffs. This kind of love implies only a total desire for the well-being of the other person, for their own good. And part of what this means is that you don't necessarily even have to like the other person to whom this love is directed. You might oppose some of their behavior. You might speak against some of what they stand for or believe. But if you love your enemies in the way Jesus describes here in this passage, the way you express your dislike, your opposition for someone, or the way they live or believe, will always also express your total desire for their well-being and for their good. As if this wasn't clear enough, Jesus gives us 3 specific suggestions for how to really love our enemies. He says, do good. Really, meaning to do well, to do right by someone, to treat them honorably and justly, to bless them. What does that mean? To speak well of them, to praise them, to confer favor on them, and finally, to pray for them, to lift them up to God. to go to God on their behalf. Jesus challenges us to find meaning and fulfillment by living and giving generously of our lives, even to our enemies. Jesus continues teaching how to love our enemies as we get to the end of the passage in verses 32 through 36. He says, again, expect nothing in return. And this is a call to extend the generous give and take that is usually reserved for immediate family or really close friends and open that circle to everyone. We all have those family members or friends who, when you can call them, and the answer will be yes, no matter what the question is. That's the way God calls us to live towards others. And then in verses 37 and 38, we find another very well-known and often misunderstood teaching from Jesus where he says, do not judge. And what Jesus isn't saying here is that anything goes. Some things are better than others. Some ways of behaving are better than others. But what Jesus is telling us is that our role, especially in our relationships with those around us, is primarily to be a witness, not a judge. We are called to show, to share, and to reflect, to bear witness to God's love and abundant giving of grace, of life, of love and peace to all those we come into contact with. And I think this is primarily a teaching from Jesus against the kind of stereotyping that comes in this gossipy way that we pigeonhole and stigmatize people who are different than us, who think different than us, or act different than we do. Because that kind of judging labels others and it removes their humanity. And once we've removed their humanity, it's a lot easier to treat them badly. It relieves us of the moral obligation to treat them as we would any friend or family member. And Jesus is saying, instead of labeling those around us, especially if that label serves to give us an excuse to disregard them or to withhold something from them, Jesus calls us to love them and to live and to give generously towards them. Jesus calls us to totally desire the well-being of those around us, not because we might get something out of it, not because we will look good, but for their good, expecting nothing in return. This is how we hear and listen to Jesus. This is how we live generously, and this is how we will find meaning and value and purpose in our lives. Amen.
Take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to Thee. Take my moments and my days, let them flow in ceaseless praise. Take my hands and let them move at the impulse of Thy love. Take my feet and let them be swift and beautiful for Thee. Here am I, all of me. Take my life, it's all for Thee.
take my will and make it done. It shall be